Hello and welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda and today we're actually going to be going over my 2020 reading. This is very overdue, but we're going to review all of my reading stats for 2020. We're going to review my year in books on Goodreads for 2020, and we're going to just take a little dive and see what we read, what I read. So for Goodreads, I read 75 books this year, but for some reason when I go in my year in books, it says 68 books. I don't know why. It did that last year too, where it didn't match the actual amount of books I read. And I don't know if I'm just entering my dates in wrong or something, but whatever. It's not 68, it's 75. But if I would have read 68 books, the amount of pages that I read was 23,227. It's a lot of pages. Sometimes I'm in awe of myself. Like, I know there's a lot of other people out there, a lot of booktubers, bookstagrammers that read like 100 books, more than 100 books a year. But dang, I also read a lot, okay? The shortest book I read at 173 pages was Relish My Life in the Kitchen by Lucy Kensley. And I actually did a book review on this one, and I cooked one of the recipes from it. I made chocolate chip cookies while I talked about the book. So I'll link that below if you guys want to check it out. That was very fun. I really enjoyed that book. It was like a memoir slash kind of like YA kind of slash like graphic novel. And it was very enjoyable, very relaxing, very chill. I really enjoyed it, so it was cool. And then the longest book that I read was 752 pages, Blood in the Water, The Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and Its Legacy by Heather Ann Thompson. I really enjoyed this book. It was very good, very fascinating, and very informative. It talks about the Attica Prison Uprising in 1971 and details the atrocities and just a lack of justice overall in that event in our history, and it's just really well done and I really enjoyed it. I also have a book review on that, so check that out. The average book length that I read in 2020 was about 341 pages, which, yeah, it's pretty good. No comment there. The most popular book that I read in 2020 was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This was one of the first audiobooks that I listened to at the start of the pandemic, and so it holds a special place in my heart because Kristen Hanna and The Great Alone company with Animal Crossing, and we got through it. We got through March. I enjoyed that book. It was pretty good. I had some issues with like some of the ending parts. That was a pretty long book, and I thought that like if you had already gone the distance, might as well just keep going to round out the story. So that I wish it was a bit longer, because I think Kristen Hanna could have ironed out some things, but whatever, it's okay. The least popular book that I read was, and I have it, Black Detroit: A People's History of Self-Determination by Herb Boyd. I read this summer, and I actually got this like a couple years ago. Somebody from my office was giving away books, and I picked it up. And I enjoyed this. I thought it was very good. I thought it was very informative, especially because I'm not from the area, so I actually live in a suburb of Detroit right now. So this was actually really helpful for me just to know more about the area that I live in and more about the Black experience here and in Detroit. So that was really cool. I do think it was a little like dry. I think that if you're not from here and you don't know a lot of the landmarks they talk about, it's kind of doesn't really hit the mark as much as I think the author's intending. But I do think there's still a lot of good stuff in here, especially since Detroit's such a is such like an important place in history. So I don't know, I think it was pretty good. I would recommend, but I would say that, you know, it might take you a bit to get through it. It took me a little longer than I thought. So, but I think a lot of good information was in here. So, and I'm really glad I read it. Wow, only 1,473 people read that book. And I forgot to mention, 830,664 people read The Great Alone. Wow. My average rating for 2020 was 3.9, which doesn't seem accurate because looking back, it's not like I read a lot of amazing books. I am very Midwest nice when it comes to rating books. I think I rate too high. I am not as critical with my star rating. which I think that should be one of my resolutions for 2021. Get better at my star rating. The highest rated book that I read on Goodreads, which is very well deserved, is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Whew, that was so good and very well deserved. It has an average of 4.7 stars on Goodreads, which I don't know how anybody wouldn't rate that 5 stars, but they're lost. They're a lost cause. And I think that's it for my Goodreads. So I also did a thing, which I don't think I'll do it again this year, because it was just, I was really on top of it, and then halfway through the year, I just stopped. I did this reading log spreadsheet that I think I got from Book Riot, where I could put in, the book, I could put in if it was an audiobook, I could put in if there was an own voices, if there was a person of color author, a woman, a female or a male author, an LGBTQ author, and all that jazz, which I really thought it was interesting. And it is interesting to look at the charts of stuff, but I just don't think that I got enough out of it, and I didn't utilize it enough to really put in the work to do it. So, but let's go through this. So fiction versus nonfiction, there's like a category for that. And I read 74% of the books I read were fiction and 26% were nonfiction, which I kind of realized when I talked about all my favorite nonfiction books this past year is I didn't read a ton of nonfiction, and I'm kind of sad about it. So hopefully this year I'll read more nonfiction. 61% of the books I read this year were print and 39% were audio, which is very interesting because I used to never listen to audiobooks. And I think that number, if I was to do this again, would go up. Like, I think a lot of the books I'll read in 2021 will be audiobooks. At least half, probably. 92.2% of the books I read were adult books, and only 7.8% were YA. I'm not a huge YA fan, so if you're new to the channel, I don't read a lot of it, but occasionally I will pick up a YA book. If it's very highly recommended, or if I was doing like a readathon or something, and that's like the group book or whatever, I usually will try to pick it up and check it out. I got 80.5% of my books from the library. That's sick. You guys, if you're trying to save money in 2021 and you read a lot of books, use your library. If it's accessible to you. Because I was watching this YouTube video on consumerism in BookTube, and somebody was talking about how they didn't have a library accessible to them, and that's why they buy a lot of books. So I shouldn't always throw that out there, but if you have a library accessible to you, utilize it. I purchased 5.2% of the books I had. I borrowed 7.8% of the books I read, and 6.5% of the books I had read were gifts. It's nice. The most books I read in a month were 8. I was trucking those months. Ooh, so this is another one that I'm really interested in, is the author, artist, gender. So 80.5% of the books I read were female authors, which I'm really, really happy about. 2.6% were non-binary author, and 16.9% were male authors. So I would like to read more non-binary authors, so I'm trying to think of that going into next year, or this current year. 61.3% of the authors I read were people of color, and 38.9% were white authors. And this is where I do think I need improvement, is 92% of the authors I read were non-queer, and only 8% were queer authors. So definitely need to start working on that. And that was kind of it. Yeah, so I like this because I liked this chart, this Excel sheet, because it made me examine where I think I'm lacking in the areas that I'm reading. But it was just too much to keep up with. So I think what I'm going to try to start doing going into 2021 is every month just kind of like, not like put it into a spreadsheet, but like just kind of sit down and before I do my monthly wrap up, or like after I do it, just kind of think about the books I read in the past month. Were they authors of color? Were they by women? Were there any like queer representation? Was there any own voices representation? What like marginalized groups did I read from? What, cultures did I read from? And like take that and go into my next month knowing like, okay, hey, I didn't really read any Indigenous authors in January. So maybe February I should start like thinking of what books I could read next that include an Indigenous author, or the same with like queer author or queer protagonist, whatever. So I think that's how I'm gonna kind of try to do it this year. And it's just a lot easier, and I think it's like just a lot less places to keep up with. So yeah. So that was my year in review of 2020. Overall, I'm pretty proud. I met my 75 books per year goal. I read mainly female authors. I read from a lot of people of color, and I hope to continue that trend and just add more layers to it. So very, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just happy with my year of 2020, my reading, and I think that 2021 will be even better. So in the comments below, let me know how you guys felt about your 2020 reading. What are you looking forward to your 2021 reading? And yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.